Support for Flying Valiant builds is brought to you by 1st and 64th Customs, where no diecast is safe. Video Geek Productions, all business, all geek. The Brian Smith YouTube channel. Clever schemes for fun and profit. Westlake 164s on Instagram. Quality Customs. A generous grant from the Jonathan Vonesh Foundation, and from support from viewers like you. Please like, share, and subscribe. Now something from when your ride takes its last ride. Who says you can't take it with you? Hey there folks, Chuck here, and wow, this is a really late release of this video, but yeah, I'm not going to get into the personal and many reasons why this video is late. We're just going to dive in and get this thing done, because I've got other vehicles that I need to get to, and we're just going to power through this. So I apologize to Paul over at Diecast Graveyard for this being incredibly late. This was part of his hearse challenge, and he basically, well, I'll tell you what. Let's just get to the breakdown, and I'll explain to you how the hearse challenge is supposed to go. Basically, you were to take any non-hearse casting and make it into a hearse. I loved the idea of doing a car hauler, and I had this Cruisin Illusion that I saw Danny's Diecast Disasters do an amazing build on, and I had to get one of these to try something for myself, so thought the theme could be, let's take it with you. And of course, that would mean adding some occupants. And since this was a Halloween build, I wanted to make it spoopy, but not too spooky. Let's have some fun with this. Ready? Punch that subscribe button. Let's boogie. So the cool thing about the Cruisin Illusion is that it actually comes with two bases. And I didn't even realize this when I bought the car, but there's actually a built-in magic trick where you can make a car appear in the trailer. Unfortunately, once you paint it, it makes that trick unusable, but we'll get to that in a minute. The tampos on the plastic proved to be tricky. There's an old trick of removing tampos from plastic on Hot Wheels and other diecast cars by using sugar, and after a lot of attempts with sugar, that did not work. I tried oven cleaner, that also didn't work. I didn't want to use anything acetone based because I knew that would dissolve the plastic. And then I realized it really doesn't matter, let's just sand the whole thing off. So basically I wanted to make this trailer so that the top of the trailer was like an unearthed sarcophagus or crypt, and the bottom part is like the gondola that carries the tomb. Also, I loved that the grill on the truck looked a lot like teeth, and I wanted it to have kind of a skeletal look, so make it look like one of the teeth had broken off. There were very few casting lines to deal with on the metal part of the cab, so I just added some dents and some rot. There was a lot of priming to do with this casting, as you can see here. I did go back and add some modulation. I did finally spring for some black primer along with the white primer, and that has really helped with adding modulation and keeping a consistent texture. I wasn't thrilled with the yellow glass, but it ended up working out, I think. Some pledge floor dip, and then I wanted to make one of the headlight casings look like it had cracked. It was made out of a very thick glass that had cracked. There was also this weird little bit of mechanical nonsense up front, so I wanted to black that out before adding details on the steampunk works that this thing had all over it. I also added a 3D printed Mad Max style steering wheel. I just happened to have this one lying around, and it was already broken, which was perfect for this build, so I just put it on top of the steering wheel that was there. This is the Stuart Simple Culture Hustle mirror paint again. I just love working with this stuff. Because I wanted the top of the trailer to look like a crypt, I thought a concrete paint would look really good. And I got this folk art painted finishes in dark concrete. It's basically a texture paint with a lot of grit in it, and I thought, oh, this will look perfect as concrete. And well, the color was good and the finish was good. Unfortunately, I noticed that it was really, really gritty, like too gritty, and almost cartoonishly so. So I had to wipe it off and start over. So I went back with some polyscale aged concrete and then dabbed it with a sponge. And then I used some regular polyscale concrete to add another layer, and then sponged off part of it, and then tried fixing it, and that didn't work. So I had to wipe it all off and try again. So on the third time, I tried a makeup sponge, and that got me the texture I was looking for. I went with lead belcher on some of the stuff rather than Stuart Simple's mirror paint just to give it a more dulled silver appearance in spots. This is also a Citadel paint called Wraith's Bone, and it has a good off-white, again, skeletal coloration to it, which I thought was perfect for the grill. But then, what good is a menacing grin if it doesn't have a gold tooth? So I decided to give the grill a gold tooth along with the chipped tooth. And what good is a spooky steering wheel without a few red dots for eyes? Once the paint was dry, I went at it with the hobby knife to give the concrete paint a few cracks. And I didn't do anything with them, I just cut the cracks, and you'll see why in a minute. I was so excited during this build that this finally came in the mail. I've been trying to get this in the States for a long time, and it's been really hard to find it for like under $25 with shipping, but it finally showed up, and I love ultramatte finishes, and I've heard amazing things about this AK Interactive ultramatte finish, so trying it out was a huge thing for me, and I'm very happy with the results. I also have Vallejo's ultramatte, and I have Deco Art's ultramatte, and I will be doing a comparison of the three in a coming video. My friend the Chipping Colored Pencil came back and helped out in a big way. You can see the modulation on the cab already. There was nothing else done to that other than I sprayed some black paint under the red when I did it, and it's amazing the effect that it has, especially on a bright color like red. And if you haven't seen me doing this in other videos, this is a very fun process that you just dip these AK Interactive weathering pencils in water, and it's like a dry brush combination with a little bit of smearing. It's a lot like a grease paint more than a watercolor marker, and I don't know how it works, but it acts like a grease paint, but it dissolves in water, and you stipple it and it creates these amazing chipping effects. I stuck mostly to just the chipping color this time around. I originally went with a gray-blue on the underside of the trailer. This was another type of paint I was trying out. This is Secret Weapons Rust Shadow, and it's supposed to be like a regular paint, but it acted more like a shade or a filter. It really didn't do much as far as coverage goes. Like, it did a good job of creating a wash over things. Like, it was thicker than a wash, but not quite an actual paint. So I don't know if I'm just using it wrong or I don't understand how it's being used, but I'm pretty sure I shook it well enough and it was not thick enough for what I was trying to do. So I did end up using it in a few spots, like on here, you can see, to add some literal shadow under stuff, some literal shadow under ridges and such. And I like the effect, but again, it wasn't quite what I was looking for. So I'll keep playing with it. You can see here how it really just barely covered. So I went back to my polyscale tarnished black to cover up all the wheel well openings and things that I don't want to draw attention to, create shadows. And then I sealed everything up on the cab with a regular matte varnish because I wanted a little bit of sheen on the cab of the truck. Yeah, and this is where I realized that using the Illusion Slide Locks effect was not going to work. But then I had a bigger problem. This is my favorite new type of paint. Sort of a texture paint, sort of not. It's called Dry Rust. It's a Vallejo paint. And part of that texture blocked flow out of the bottle. And I thought I'd give it a little oomph to get it out. And it popped the cap off and shot paint all over the trailer and my work area. And yeah, that was a big mess. And that was when I realized there was no way this was going to make the Halloween deadline. And then a bunch of other personal stuff came up. But time to clean up. All right, we're back. Again, I went with tarnished black for the wheels. I decided to keep the plastic wheels on this just for simplicity's sake. You can see I applied a lot of the dry rust on the bottom of this trailer, trying to not waste paint. It was such a mess to clean up. And I'm going over it with a chipping color to fill in the dark spots. And this stuff is so great. I seriously cannot recommend these pencils enough, and they are so cheap. You can find them for a couple bucks online. I used Citadel's Typhus Corrosion on the axle cap on the trailer. It was the one piece of diecast on the back of the trailer. And then touched up various spots of the chassis. And I will say the Citadel paints, for the many complaints that are valid about them, Typhus Corrosion and Ryza Rust as a combo is almost magic when it comes to creating rust effects, and I love using them on wheels like this. This is another newbie for me. This is the Citadel Seraphim Sepia shade, and I really liked the Nuln oil. It's funny because on one hand I feel like a wash is a wash, but Nuln oil did a really good job as a water-based wash, and I wanted to try the sepia, and I found the local hobby shop that sold it. So support your local hobby shops, folks. You'll be amazed what you find in there. It's basically a light brown wash, but it did a good job of bringing out details in the seats, and I gave the grille a little bit of a sepia tone as well. Well, hello, Mr. E-Type Jaguar. What are you doing here? It seems our occupant for the trailer has arrived. I didn't want anything showing through his burial shroud, so the white pallor needed to be applied from the Autoborn sealer first. Then glued the axles in place because he's going nowhere. It was time to get him prepped for burial. This is, again, matte Mod Podge mixed with a little water on some classic wrapping tissue paper, and then worked with a craft stick to create folds in the right spots. This is Vallejo Rust Wash over everything. Give it the pallor of rust. It works really well with the mirror paint to create a rusty hue over something that would still look pretty chrome-like. So it dulls the finish a little bit, but you still get that good reflectivity. And then I remembered I didn't drill out the exhaust pipes on the back of the truck. So I did that, and I was immediately glad I did because it really added some realism to the exhaust pipes. Time to debut another new feature. I was using Camel to track some prices, and Tamiya's brown panel liner came up on a very good deal. So I snapped this up. I've never used Tamiya panel liner before, and I love it. It is fantastic. I don't know if I would say it's better than the AK Interactive, but I do love this built-in brush applicator, and cleanup on it is very easy. Usually I didn't need to put any thinner on the Q-tip to buff away the excess when it dried. It just came right off, which was very handy. And again, I'm using an oil-based panel liner on top of water-based paint, and that keeps the panel liner from reactivating the paint or mixing with the paint below it, so it sits in the cracks, which is really nice. And if I was using an oil-based clear coat or an oil-based paint, I would use a water-based wash on top of it, which is why it's handy to have a little of each in your arsenal. This made such quick work of the panel lines and getting good pin washes around things. I used some craft paint here. This is Worn Penny to create a sort of tarnished copper look to some of the steampunk works on the trailer. I also used some metallic nickel and a few other coppery shades before moving on to the verdigris, but more on that in a minute. Jumping back over to the Jag, once the shroud had dried, I gave the entire thing a thick coating of ultra matte to seal it up, and since I had a little extra left over, I did the tires as well. I took the Stuart Simple mirror paint again and did the cab lights and turn signals. I just really like the idea of a rusty vehicle with chrome still bright and shining on it, and some testers turn signal amber in these front lights. I wanted a little showing through of the Jag, and I used AK Interactive decay deposits to give it a sickly green look, not unlike a zombified car might have. Once all the acrylic paint was dry, I went over it with AK Interactive Landing Gear Wash to create a black, shiny, grimy background, and I was almost happy with it. Again, the great thing about using craft paints for the metallics and an oil base for the wash is I didn't have to worry about the oil base taking any of the metallic finish off of the steampunk works. And while I had that out, I filled in the grill of the Jag and went over the entire thing with Army Painter's Strong Wash, bring out details in the folds and make this shroud look good and decayed. Then paint the exposed wheel and give the hub a little bit of typhus corrosion. While I had the typhus corrosion out, I went over the order of the steampunk works. I originally painted gunmetal here, but I much preferred the corrosion look. Then added some corrosion effects to the hauler up front. And before I brought everything together, there was an annoying mashing of the different molds in the plastic where the gas tank was a split point. So before I painted those, I wanted to make sure that I glued the bottom of the cab together, which meant having the wheels done and in place, and then going over the mold mark with some gap filling CA glue. Can still, in the final product, see the gap, but it's not nearly as obvious, and I think it turned out okay. Again, I used the Citadel lead belcher here because I didn't want it as reflective as the chrome out front, but I liked the idea of these still being pretty shiny, and the lead belcher has a really good tarnished steel look to it. And again, besides the annoying paint containers, a very excellent application process. It lays very well. So here's that verdigris from Green Stuff World that I was very eager to try, and it worked really well. I really like that this paint has a bit of separation to it. Like, no matter how much you shake it, there's a little bit of swirliness to the green and the blue. I used both here, and it really helps with adding a variety of texture to the corrosion. Again, to look like a freshly unearthed crypt, I went over the entire concrete area with MIG's subtle dirt effect, and it was subtle, almost too subtle. Like really, you could only see it when it was done on the base where the concrete meets the metal, and that ended up working really well, I thought. Again, the Typhus Corrosion Rise or Rust works perfectly on the undead bumper of this car and on its wheel hub. It really almost feels like cheating. This stuff is so easy to work with. Alright, time to get the trailer together and start adding the final effects. Again, I wanted this trailer to look like the top of it was part of a freshly unearthed crypt, so we needed some mossy, slimy green effects to it. And this is Doc O'Brien's weathering powders. I also wanted some exhaust stainage on the front of the trailer, and this is grimy black, along with mildew green and dirty brown to add some dirt effects. This is rusty brown on the bottom part of the trailer, and some more mildew green. This is AK Interactive Pigment Binder holding everything together. It's an amazing potion because it goes right over everything that you've been applying pigment to and doesn't disturb it when you brush over it. There's a little bit of blending that happens, but it's very subtle. Again, I wanted the shroud to look like it had a little bit of mildew and grime as well. Used AK Interactive City Dirt on the cab and the base of the truck to give it some dirty looks. And then I noticed the tiny taillights in the back, so I had to fill those in. Oh, there's my 2-year-old lending a hand. Again, I wanted to seal everything up with a ultra matte varnish, make the shroud look as cloth-like as possible. And once I was sure I was done with the pigments, I went over the top of the trailer with the ultra matte varnish again. It was a little all over the place on this build, so I almost forgot to go back over the corrosion that I'd brushed onto the truck itself with some Riser Rust, and that really helped those areas stand out. It's interesting, you can get different effects with the Riser Rust by going directly over the Typhus corrosion while it's wet or waiting until it's dry, and both methods look good. You just get a little more blending when it's still wet on wet. Again, I went over the details on the base of the truck with the Tamiya wash once the lead belcher paint had dried. And then I used Vallejo fuel stains on the tanks. And I liked how that looked, so I went over a few details on the cab to give it some shiny grime in spots, like these footholds on the cab. I did a second coat of the fuel stains just to add some extra browny grime to the tanks. I really like how that turned out. Paid a little extra attention over the fuel caps to make it look like extra fuel residue. And then a little bit on the hookup part of the truck, so that it would look like some grease and stuff had gathered. This is MIG dust deposits on the inside of the trailer, and this is AK Interactive moss deposits. It created a pretty good look for what I was going for, but it didn't quite give me the texture I wanted, so I thought I'd kick things up a notch. But first, gotta get that cab back together. And I stippled on some Vallejo rain marks and then just went over everything again with a Q-tip to grind it in and make it look like things had been wiped off, but not very well wiped off. Now it's time for some texture. I picked this up, thanks to my patrons. It is dark green moss deposits, making it interactive. And really interesting, I discovered pretty quickly that there's not enough adhesive on it to actually stay in place, but it was good to test fit. And while I was gluing those in place, I fired up the 3D printer and made myself a crypt marker using some existing text and a placard frame and some skulls that I found. Bonus points to you if you can figure out what movie this is a reference to, and leave it in the comments below. I brushed on some Autoborn sealer here. I decided to just brush on the primer for this because of the final effect I was going for. I just brushed on some primer here and started with a root beer metallic to create an aged bronze look. And once that was dry, I went over it with the verdigris green and a little bit of the verdigris blue from Green Stuff World. And man, is that stuff cool. It really does a good job of creating a weathered bronze look. Once that was dry, I gave it some Nuln oil and a little bit of the sepia wash as well, because why not? I designed some decals in Photoshop and used my fancy new printer that can print white to create multi-level decals. I decided this time around to not try and line up the white with the color, because that can be a little tricky, and I'll explain why in a different video, but I will link to the video from Fat Guy Productions that explains why it's a little tricky working with this white and then printing color setup. I decided to separate each decal out into its own separate thing. So first I would lay down the white and then I would lay down the color, with the exception of the door logos, which I laid down the color first and then the white on top because it was white text. But man, is it nice to be able to print white lettering. It is so cool. So yeah, please check out Paul's videos. I'll link to his stuff. It's really great. He introduced me to the ability to do this. It was really tricky to get the yellow text to appear over the white text. I almost gave up on it because it was so hard to see the yellow. I think I'll avoid using yellow text from here on out. It was time to put my occupant in place on the trailer. He was about to experience something that was going to take my builds to a whole new level. But before that, I needed to get some more moss on the trailer. I decided to also add some sprinkled on flocking that I had that was also a dark green. And again, this isn't particularly realistic or based on anything, but it's really fun. And that was part of the fun, was to make a spooky build, but have it be like fun, spooky movie stuff. A lot of fun to work with flocking. I need to work it into my builds more. And once I had all of the flocking on that I thought I needed, it's time to get the flock out of here. And add some dark, slimy grime from AK Interactive to add some streaking. Add a little rust wash over the white text to dull it up. And then add some stippling from the dry rust paint to make it look like the lettering had chipped some. And here we go. This is the part that I was really excited about. And it took the most time, but it was ultimately very rewarding. First, I took some thread. I think I should have used monofilament line here, but the white thread worked okay. And added some connecting points. Once those were applied, then the real fun could start. Here it is, the fabled Green Stuff World Spider Serum. The ability to spray cobwebs straight out of your airbrush. I could not wait to try this stuff out. So I was a little nervous buying the Spider Serum because it supposedly needs a very specialized Spider Serum cleaner. And you're basically spraying liquid plastic cement out of your airbrush to create this effect. And I kind of had a feeling that I knew how to clean it out of my airbrush without buying the extra Spider Serum cleaner. And so I decided to give it a shot. This stuff was really wild to work with. Definitely wear a mask. I was wearing a mask while using this and in a well-ventilated room that also had all the windows open. It is potent, but the effect is incredible. It's basically like shooting cotton candy out that becomes permanent cobwebs on whatever you're shooting, and it is such a cool effect, and I love it. It is amazing. Again, the durability is not super great on it. It is definitely not something you would want to put on something that will be in motion, but if you want some killer cobweb effects, this is the only way to go. And spoiler alert, I hope I don't get in trouble for this, but you can clean this stuff by using an acetone-based cleaner. I just dumped a bunch of brake cleaner into my airbrush afterwards, and it cleaned it out just fine. And you can get a whole can of that stuff for like $3 at your local auto parts store. And once that was done, it was time to seal up the tomb until it was time to go on display again, and use my handy dandy new Flying Valiant decals that I made with my new white printing printer. Give build number 0022 its designation and get it ready for its final appointment. So again, before we do the final reveal, here's a look at what we started with, the Cruisin Illusion, which is a very cool fantasy casting. I am very much impressed with it. I have surprised myself with enjoying more fantasy castings from Hot Wheels. I didn't think I would, but there's a few of them out there, a very select few, that are really fun, and this is one of them. I would probably do another one of these, because this was a really fun build to work with. And now let's send it to its great beyond. There it is, straight out of the depths of Hades itself, ready to haul you there and back with all your worldly possessions. I don't know what those mechanics do, but I'm sure there's some kind of Faustian bargain being done with the mechanic to bring your favorite set of wheels into the afterworld. And man, I forgot how much I don't like this turntable, but it's the only turntable I have that can handle these larger builds. This was a lot of fun. There were a lot of other great builders in this hearse challenge. So be sure to check out Diecast Graveyard and the other builders that participated and got their builds in on time. Again, I apologize so much to Paul for this one not being ready in time, but family first, and I was glad I was able to be there for them. And I'm going to continue to be there for them. This was a lot of fun. Thanks again for watching. I have another build coming up on November 11th, and after that I'm going to be backing off a little bit on the challenges. I love the challenges that I've been participating in, but I am having to work with an increasingly tight schedule, and it's getting tougher and tougher for me to build my own builds and not focus just on the challenges, and I have several commissions that I need to get done. So I'm going to need to put my head down for a bit and get some stuff done on my own pace and focus on a few of my own builds, but I will still be back doing more challenges soon. I just have some stuff I gotta get taken care of first. I've got a big truck. I still have to finish rewiring the Flying Valiant truck, and the actual Flying Valiant needs some work as well. So I'll still be doing car projects, just in a different scale for a bit. As always, my builds are all for sale. If you like this one or one of the other builds that you've seen in my videos, be sure to shoot me an email at flyingvaliant@gmail.com and we can talk about making one of these part of your collection. I'd like to thank all of my amazing patrons. You saw the Bandit level patrons at the beginning of the video, but also Mid-Island Custom Diecast at the Rockford level. Thank you, Evan. Subscribe to his channel. He's amazing. My even more amazing wife, Carolyn, who is an incredible math tutor and an amazing support. And my Douglas level patrons, the Drew Rants and Raves podcast, Jordan Kleinhenn, and Curtis Craft's YouTube channel. Check him out. His stuff is really cool. There are plenty of great ways to support this channel, including the Patreon, but you can also like, share, subscribe. That always helps. It's really amazing that we're getting this close to 650 subscribers, and I had set a goal for myself of hitting 1,000 in the first year, which that would be in February. So it'd be amazing if we could get there. So if you're watching this and you're not already a subscriber, please hit that subscribe button. That would be really amazing to help me out and help this channel continue to grow. Another way to support this channel and my amazing brother who does all the artwork for it is to visit his TeePublic store at JEPEG Design on TeePublic. There's a link in the description, and you can buy Flying Valiant merch, or he's got some other really great automotive themed apparel, and there's masks and stickers and t-shirts and all sorts of awesome stuff. And he is incredibly talented, and I'm so grateful that he has chosen to help me with this by supplying his amazing artwork. He actually just did some artwork for Westlake 164, who is a patron of this show, and I heard he was pretty happy with it. So he also does freelance work, so please check him out. I've been a little better at posting on my Instagram, and if you like these builds and want to see more still shots in detail, you can find them over at Flying Valiant on Instagram. And if you want to support these builds monetarily, all of my supplies come from donations and sales of my cars. You can find out more about that at flyingvaliant.com. But as always, the best thing that you can do is subscribe to this channel and share these videos with your friends. So thank you to everyone who's done that. It's been amazing to get that bump every now and then from people who mention me and share my videos, and it really means a lot. I'm in the middle of another build right now that will be due in a couple days, so I'm going to get to that. But as always, I want to thank you for coming along with me for the ride. So until next time, stay fresh, cheese bags.